Hello again everyone, and welcome to another video by me, Olle Cedersund. It's good to see you again. Today's topic is the mind-body prescription. Physical reactions to emotional states are the stuff of everyday life. You have a close call on the highway and your heart begins to pound. You're getting up to address an audience and your mouth is dry. You have butterflies in the stomach. The body is intimately connected to the mind, and particularly to emotions. How could it be otherwise? This is a quote from a wonderful book written by Dr. John Sarno. He worked for several decades with patients who have chronic pain disorders of different kinds. He's primarily a back doctor, and so he has dealt mostly with back problems. But this book is about so much more. As anyone who has had long-term or even chronic pain already knows, it is one of the most detrimental things to our quality of life. And in my opinion, Dr. Sarno has come further towards solving these kinds of problems than anyone in the Western medical field has ever come close to. And his approach is simple. Chronic pain is caused by repressed emotions in the unconscious mind. And so his treatments involve no medication, no physical therapy, none of that. It is purely an educational therapy. It might sound simple, and it kind of is. First things first, however. What is chronic pain? It can be mild or excruciating, episodic or continuous, merely inconvenient or totally incapacitating, and has been going on for months or longer. Globally, it's estimated to be approximately 1.5 billion people who are affected by this. And so this is an enormous issue. And if a purely educational approach can cure even 1% of these, that's still a shitload of people. And Dr. Sarno claims to have cured up to 90 to 95% of his patients. It's hard to imagine the effect this could have on potentially over 1 billion people worldwide. With growing experience with treating these symptoms and by studying the literature on the subject, he decided to call them tension myositis syndrome, or TMS for short. It is a painful but harmless change of state in muscles. Basically, it hurts, but there's nothing physically wrong with you. This involves things such as most low back and leg pain, most neck, shoulder and arm pain, cranial nerve pain or weakness, fibromyalgia, tension myalgia, myofascial pain syndrome, and many other similar things. And then there are equivalents of TMS and other disorders where emotions play a role, but we'll get into that later. These are all diseases where you have pain and we don't know why. It manifests in different ways, sometimes with weaknesses in the muscles, sometimes with tingling sensations or other manifestations, but we often have no idea how to actually cure them. We give drugs to help reduce the pain temporarily, we inject steroids into the base of the spine, and sometimes even perform surgery to see if that helps, which it rarely does in the long term, by the way. At first, we advise rest, and then we try physical therapy and even psychological therapy. Most of the patients that come to Sarno have been through orthopedists, neurologists, physiatrists, rheumatologists, or even specialists in sports medicine. Then they have moved on to try what we call alternative medicine. So they went to chiropractors, osteopaths, acupuncturists, massage therapists, nutritionists, naturopaths, exercise specialists and so on. But the pain persisted and they are still severely restricted in their physical activities. And so Sarno tends to see the most persistent cases. People who have had problems for 10, 20 or even 30 years. And what he tells them is this: your problems are not physical. You are not injured in any way. The pain, however, is real. It's not just in your head. It's real physical pain, but the cause is emotional. The cause is repressed rage in the unconscious mind. The purpose of the pain is to divert your attention from the rage, to keep it well hidden in the unconscious mind, because to see it would be worse than the pain, or so the unconscious mind thinks anyway. The conscious mind would probably say it would rather experience the emotion than the pain, but the unconscious mind works very differently. He explains it like this. In reality, we have 3 minds. We have the conscious, the unconscious, and the subconscious. This book is primarily concerned with the first 2, and the third one, the subconscious, is a fascinating area, but it's relevant here only to the extent that learning takes place in the subconscious, and learning is the foundation of the therapeutic process. For the other two, this table might be helpful. So we have the conscious mind, which is external, logical, thoughtful, controlled, mature, concerned for others, strives to be perfect, good, and so on. And then we have, in contrast, the unconscious mind, which is more internal, irrational, emotional, wild, childish, and so on. Now, the unconscious mind is not all negative as the table might suggest. This table is merely to understand what leads to physical symptoms. It's also essential to clarify here the difference between anger or rage that we feel consciously and the repressed emotion referred to here. He brings up some examples of things that might make your unconscious mind angry to the point of rage. It can be the man who felt compelled to participate in an activity he dislikes to please his wife. Or it can be someone taking care of his or her elderly parents, not objecting consciously, but seething inwardly. It can be the young men and women who are sexually abused as children, or the woman with 6 children who loves being a mother but is unaware of her inner rage at all that motherhood entails. Or it can be the mother who invariably has a pain attack after her holidays because of the enormous amount of work she had to do for the family, taken for granted by everyone. Or it can be the 55-year-old man who has been angry at his mother or father since childhood. And there's no better story explaining all of this than one that he calls A Letter from Helen. A number of months prior to the letter, he had successfully treated Helen for low back pain, and so she was very aware of how the mind-body connection works. Helen was 47 years old and quite suddenly started to remember being sexually abused by her father as a child and a teenager. She decided to join a support group for adult women survivors of incest. And the first day, her back began to hurt. But knowing what this meant, she reassured herself that this was nothing serious and she was relatively unconcerned. She did, however, find herself, despite trying to keep some distance from these unknown women, she felt very much overwhelmed by the amount of pain and havoc wrought in these women's lives, as well as her own life, by the abuse. And then, over the next 48 hours, the pain gradually increased in severity to the point where she could not get out of bed. She was paralyzed with pain. She told her supportive husband that she couldn't understand why she would have this pain when she understood its psychogenic purpose. Distraught, she wondered why the therapeutic concept wasn't working. Her husband then replied, "You're talking about 40 years of repressed anger." And she continues, "And then, in an instant, I started to cry. Not little tears, not sad, quiet, oh my back hurts so much tears, but the deepest, hardest tears I have ever cried. Out of control tears. Anger, rage, desperate tears. And I heard myself saying things like, 'Please take care of me. I don't ever want to have to come out from under the covers. I'm so afraid. Please take care of me. Don't hurt me. I want to cut my wrists. Please let me die. I have to run away. I feel sick.' And so on and on. I couldn't stop and her husband, bless him, just held me. And as I cried and as I voiced these feelings, it was literally as if there was a channel, a pipeline from my back and out through my eyes. I felt the pain almost pour out as I cried. It was weird and strange and transfixing. I really knew that what I was feeling at that moment was what I felt as a child, when no one would or could take care of me. The scaredness, the grief, the loneliness, the shame, the horror. And as I cried, I was that child again, and I recognized the feelings I've felt all of my life, which I thought were crazy or, at the very best, bizarre. Maybe I removed myself from my body and never even allowed myself to feel when I was young. But the feelings were there, and they poured over and out of me. This story, though obviously powerful and moving, also proves a few important points about the subject. Number one is feelings generated in infancy and childhood permanently reside in the unconscious and may be responsible for psychological and physical symptoms throughout life. 2. Strong, painful, embarrassing and threatening feelings like rage, grief and shame are repressed in the unconscious. Number 3. Repressed emotions constantly strive to come to consciousness. And number 4. The purpose of symptoms, physical or emotional, is to prevent repressed feelings from becoming conscious by diverting attention from the realm of the emotions to that of the physical. It is a strategy of avoidance. And in Helen's case, the pain also increased the closer she got to discovering what was hidden underneath. And as she had her breakthrough, the pain immediately disappeared as the emotions took over. This is one of the most extreme examples of these kinds of breakthroughs, but breakthroughs happen like this relatively often in his treatments, and it's usually when he works together with psychotherapists. And every time the pain disappears afterwards. It's hard to know though what will trigger a patient's breakthrough, and so sometimes you need to approach it from many different angles. Most of the time, however, it doesn't even have to go that far. The knowledge of the mind-body connection is often enough. You have to really believe it though. He says in response to back pain, but you can substitute it for wherever you have the pain. And I quote, "The pain will not stop unless you are able to say, 'I have a normal back.' I now know that the pain is due to a basically harmless condition initiated by the brain to serve a psychological purpose. And then you need to start using your body as if there is nothing wrong with you, because there isn't." Then you might say, "But I have an X-ray showing a herniated disc," or something similar to that. This is not what is causing your pain, however. For example, one study published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Maureen Jensen. Her group studied MRI scans of people's backs and came to the conclusion that the discovery by MRI of bulges and protrusions in people with low back pain may frequently be coincidental. Other studies show the same thing. The structural abnormalities that have been found on X-rays, CT scans or MRIs are normal changes associated with activity and aging and have nothing to do with your pain. In 1987, Sarno did his own follow-up study on his patients, who all had documented herniated discs that were thought to be the cause of their pain. He treated them for TMS, which, as you know, is an educational treatment. And a couple of years later, 88% were completely free from pain, leading completely normal lives. 10% were significantly improved but not completely normal, and 2% failed to improve. Since then, he claims to have gotten significantly better at treating people, getting the success rate well over 90%. For him, this has been a daily practice for many years. People come in with structural changes in their spines or with a chronic condition like fibromyalgia or something similar, and then they recover completely days or weeks after learning about TMS. He also claims that the brain is smart. It will induce pain in areas where you might have an old injury, for example, to make it more believable, in order to more successfully distract you from the real issue. Sometimes the pain might change, but the cause is the same. He calls this symptom substitution. For example, one patient, a 55-year-old man who had been treated successfully for various manifestations of TMS over a period of years. He also had a long history of depression for which he was treated with medications and psychotherapy. In 1994, he was put on an antidepressant that was very effective, and by the fall he was in excellent spirits. At this point, he suddenly developed severe manifestations of TMS, including major muscle weakness in one of his ankles. Sarno interprets this as symptom substitution. The medication had altered the brain chemistry and alleviated the depression, but it had done nothing to change the intrapsychic conflicts responsible for the depression. Therefore, another distraction had to be found, and the mind resorted to one it had used many times before: back and leg pain. And so, it's not only pain that works this way, but panic attacks, depression, anxiety, even OCD seems to work this way. He even claims that most things that are hard to explain work this way, like headaches, stomach aches, allergies, skin conditions, are just the beginning. But it's important to remember that they are normal. Most, if not all, people's minds work this way. And it's not imaginary, foolish, or hypochondriacal. This is a public health issue that needs to be taken seriously and studied intensively, but we need to have the correct approach. Treating symptoms and praying it goes away is not a very effective strategy. Now, you might be wondering how the heck this works. You might understand it intellectually and can see the reasonings behind it, but how the heck does the brain accomplish all of these symptoms? The explanation is relatively simple. Of course, we don't understand nearly everything the brain actually does, like how does it think, or how does it produce and comprehend language, how does it create. This doesn't mean that we can't understand thoughts or language, however. And the same thing can be said here. The brain can cause physical symptoms. And I quote, "Laboratory and clinical evidence suggest that it has chosen to work through the autonomic nervous system, which is the subsection of the central nervous system that controls the body's involuntary functions, including the circulation of blood. By mildly restricting the flow of blood to the target tissues, it reduces the available oxygen. The result is pain if muscle or tendon are the targets, and the result is pain, numbness, tingling, and perhaps weakness if a nerve is involved. This mild oxygen deprivation is the basis for all of these symptoms, and explains why high-frequency sound waves, massage, and exercise can cause temporary pain relief in the affected areas. It simply increases blood flow, which temporarily increases oxygen levels as well. There is a decent amount of research out there supporting these theories, but as always, more studies are of course needed. This discussion has finally been up in the American Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee in February of 2012. I will link the discussion in the description. It is time to take these issues seriously and start working on both our mental and our physical health, as they are obviously interconnected. And if you find any of this useful or interesting, I would highly recommend reading any of his books, as they all have very good ratings online, so you can't really go wrong there. And now I will finally end this video with a quote from Sarno himself. "It is totally without logic to propose that after millions of years of evolution, during which we have become the dominant species on this planet, that our bodies have become structurally incompetent, or that we have become so fragile that we must be careful of how we move, how we use our bodies, or engage in repetitive activities. This is unadulterated nonsense. We are not made of paper mache. We are tough and resilient, adaptable, and quick to heal." Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you again in another video.